I know a lot of people, and probably a good majority of you, are not jazz fans. I mean, statistics just tell us this. When I worked for National Public Radio, we thought that maybe 3% of the population were jazz fans. Unfortunately, that number has declined in the 20 years. It's now 3% of 3%, probably. But that's okay. Jazz is not for everybody. And frankly, we're just as happy that it's not. Some things have to be, right, kept entre nous. So I'd like to say that if you don't know a lot about jazz, that's okay. And I hope at the end of this half hour, I will have imparted enough information to you so you'll walk out of here feeling, well, it's all right not to know about jazz. It's okay. And let me start by giving you a brief quote from a man named Pat Friendriss, who is the director of the Adler Planetarium. And he said, and I quote, "It's an analog universe. There is nothing digital about the way stars move through space." And what I like about that is that, as you all know, we live on the cusp of this new era, right? It's almost like we're all Magellans sailing off into our own private unknowns. And it's the digital unknown we're all going into. And the digital space is so valued today that anything that can be broken into pluses and minuses, yes and no, somehow takes on this aura and patina of the future. And those things that can't, like this piano, seem to be old-fashioned and left behind. And yet, the director of the Adler Planetarium says, it's an analog universe. There is nothing digital about the way stars move through space. That is, stars swing, they rotate, they circle, they are existing in relationship to one another, just as we are, just as people are. We swing, and we exist in relationship to one another. The digital universe, as you all know, is putting you in a little space capsule in your house, and you're typing away, and you're not often in contact with other people. You might be in contact with their digital representations, but how do you know that is really who they are? You know, the person who says they're 6'4" and blonde and rich could in fact be that little nerd down the block. So, you know, I don't really prepare for these sorts of things. I like to approach these as jazz experiences. You know, in jazz we say there are no mistakes, only opportunities. And I have taken plenty of opportunities, and from time to time I've failed. And that's okay. I'm willing to fail in front of you, and I hope that's part of my message, that we should be willing to fail, because without the chance of failure, there is no opportunity for success. Trial and error. Without error, there's no trial. And I want to leave you, with nothing else, with the sense that it's okay to be human. It's okay to make your mistakes and opportunities. That is, in fact, what jazz is all about. Those people that say, well, jazz, it's just a lot of notes, and what are you doing? Are you just doing anything? Well, yes. We are actually just doing anything, but within a universe that we've explored. It's not the first time. Although, this is interesting. I came in here, I looked at the ceiling, I thought, well, I've got to learn When You Wish Upon a Star. I've never played it. So I actually had to sit down here and figure it out. But I figured it out in context of other things that I've done. So I mean, at least I had some reference to where the beginning and the end of the song might have been. But it's okay not to know. As a matter of fact, it's that not knowing that leads us on. I really do believe that education is not about the answers, it's about the questions. Because if you know the answers, in a way, you've already made yourself obsolete. And unfortunately, a lot of our best students graduating today will be obsolete in 5 years, because the answers that they've learned will not have application. We can't predict the future. And this is why I think the message of jazz and the jazz experience has so much practical application for everybody, not just people looking for a cheap night out. Because it is not expensive to go hear music. You can, $5 and get a beer and you're there. What is it about the jazz experience that has application for you? Okay, well, I started out talking about analog versus digital. And the couple of things that make jazz what it is, I think I can boil this down for you. Aside from that, we're doing just anything. I mean, if anybody's interested later, I'll explain how that's literally true and untrue at the same time. Which is also something to pay attention to. You know, the more you know about something, obviously, the less you know about it. You're all familiar with the Heisenberg principle of uncertainty, right? The more you try to know about something, the more you change it. Your attention literally alters the object of your attention. It's why when we go into a recording studio to capture a piece of music, instead of capturing the piece of music, we wind up manufacturing a piece of product. In the act of trying to capture it, we actually turn it into something it's not. Sometimes I think of knowledge as captured in the metaphor, we're going to take a butterfly and see how it flies. And the way we're going to do it is we're going to pull off its wings and study it. And then we're going to know everything there is to know, but lo and behold, it no longer flies. So I'm an advocate of intuition. And I think this is where jazz and the sciences meet up. So let me tell you a few things about jazz music, what I'm doing. Then I'll play you a little more music, and by then you'll be much more comfortable with what I'm doing if you're uncomfortable now. Okay. Digital versus analog. Time is seen in our society as this hand going around the clock. Well, no. In my age, we thought of it as hand. Now kids see it as numbers flashing. 12:45, 12:46, 12:47. They don't know. This is interesting. They've lost the concept of clockwise, right? They can tell you what time it is, but they can't go counterclockwise anymore. It's the same thing with the Velcro on the shoes. They can get their shoes on, but ask them to tie the boat up, you know, and it won't. Okay. Where was I? Oh, yes. Time, we see, is the mechanical subdivision of events by a clock. Tick, 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 right? Regular, broken down into discrete, simple, repeatable pieces. That is Western society's great contribution. And when you think about it, without a clock, I mean, if I said to you, I'd like to meet you at noon under the big tree, well, a lot of us would be waiting a long time if we didn't have clocks for your idea of noon and my idea of noon to coincide. But the clock gets us under the big tree. It's a valuable thing to have. But we don't want to confuse meter, which is what that is. Meter is tick, 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 with rhythm, okay? Because rhythm, in many societies even today, has nothing to do with the mechanical subdivision of events. Rhythm is the coming and going of events. For example, the water lapping at a shore has rhythm. There's rhythm there. But the greatest source of rhythm, and we carry it all with us, is this. Now, what do you notice about that? Well, in music, we call it a dotted eighth note. They're not even. In that sound, there's tension and release, long and short, push and pull. That's analog. That's human, right? That is at the heart of jazz. That is what swing is about. When people say it doesn't swing, it swings. It's got to swing. If it doesn't swing, it's not jazz. What do you mean it swings? Well, lady, if you don't know by now, don't mess with it. That's what Fats Waller said. What is swing? Push, pull, right? Go, step back, go, step back. That's the heart of this music. And I have to say, that is, that little thing, one of America's greatest contributions to the world. Sounds silly, but I travel all over the world. And that is at the heart of blues, it's at the heart of swing, it's at the heart of rhythm and blues, it's at the heart of jazz. And those idioms have taken over the world. Wherever you go. I've been in Tokyo working with a band that doesn't speak English, and I don't speak Japanese, but we speak jazz. I've been in Costa Rica, and say habla bebop. You can go anywhere in the world, this music, this principle is known. Well, of course it's known. Everybody knows that. Okay, so that's the first thing about jazz. And as I say, it's an analog universe. The second thing about jazz that you want to know, what are they doing? Are they just doing anything? I mean, yeah, okay. But within reason. And here's what defines reason: the sound of the human voice. In Western tradition, pitch is a known phenomenon. A is 440, right? Pitch is known. Again, it's a mechanical subdivision of something that's natural. But in jazz, and it comes out of the African American tradition, and I want to say this, not just the African American tradition, because even in the Jewish tradition, of which I'm a part, there is a great virtue placed on what musicologists call melisma, and that is the elegance of the human voice, the human element in music. So you approach a note from underneath or from on top. Look, you're all listening to me talk to you now. If there was somebody who didn't speak English, they would still get meaning from what I'm saying here. Why? Because of the contour of what I'm doing. Information is not delivered. I love this metaphor. It comes out of Ludwig Wittgenstein's book. If you're at all interested in the linguistics, the philosophical investigations of Wittgenstein, he says, meaning is not transferred like coal in a train car from point A to point B. Meaning is not in the word like laid in and delivered over here and taken out. It's the contour, it's the human experience. You can get a lot from what I'm saying. In fact, I've got some of you hypnotized right now with my voice. I do, I know how it works. The human experience is hypnotic. What is it about the human experience that's hypnotic? Simple. Nobody wants to be alone in this universe. It's too big and it's scary. And the human voice, well, we all have it. And we all have it in our heads. We all have a voice in our head. And everybody's voice is capable of singing a melody. You might have a bad voice here, and I do. I don't have a particularly good voice. But everybody has their own sense of melody. What is melody? You start with one note, you go to another note. What made you go to that second note? We don't know. And we're not going to pull the wings off of that butterfly to find out. We'd rather hear the song. So, in jazz, it's this, and it's find your voice. How do you find your voice? It's a real problem. You know, everything in the world is geared toward telling you later. You'll find it later. Oh, you want to be a musician? Okay, well, we'll teach you how to play this instrument. You'll spend 14 years studying this technique. There's a right way and a wrong way. No, that's wrong. Yes, that's right. Okay, now you've got all this technique. Okay, now go out in the world and find your voice. Well, that's the same thing that we all go through, whatever our job is, whatever our love is. We fall in love with something when we're very young. Something captures our heart. And we get excited. Somehow the world opens up, and we want to do this thing. And then they welcome you into the academic institutions, and they say, okay, here's what you do. 27 years later, we'll give you a PhD. Good luck, go find your voice. The fact is, you have to believe in that little voice that's in your head, that it's as worthy as all the voices that are coming at you outside. Why does the soul doubt itself so? Why does it prefer the neurotic observations of others? It's one of the main questions of jazz. Believe in yourself. Believe in your voice. That works whatever you're doing. If you're working in a hardware store, if you're playing a gig, it's the same thing. The jazz experience is really just the basic human experience, and it's a prototypical American experience. Because, and I say this with some experience, when you go to France, most of the people there are French. And when you go to Japan, most of the people there are Japanese. But when you come to the United States, who are we? Where did we come from? Who will we be in a few years? No way to know. We are the only place in the world where you show up, you're one of us. You can't be defined out of the pool. when I was in graduate school, I went to graduate school in England. I have a degree in American Studies from Sussex University. And the reason, well, I'll be honest with you. The reason I went to Sussex University, I'm a little older than I may look. I was trying to avoid going to Vietnam, and as any travel agent will tell you, send the client where he wants to go. I preferred not to go to Vietnam, so I chose to go to graduate school in England. And so I went to the University of Sussex, where I studied well, American Studies. And the first seminar I had was called The American Identity. Well, I didn't know Americans had an identity. What's an American identity? Think about it. Well, today it's a lot easier when you travel. It's connected, unfortunately, to Colonel Sanders and MTV. But back then, this was quite a while ago, I didn't realize Americans had an identity. If I had to define the American identity to you today, I would say it's very much tied up with that and with finding your voice. And it's a bottomless pool that we have here, and it's a great gift that we have here. I'd like to sum this up with a story, with a little anecdote. Okay, so I got my PhD in American Studies in 1971, and I sent out 230 letters to colleges all over the United States to get a job teaching. I got 2 responses back. One was to teach a freshman English class, for which I was not qualified, and the other one I won't even mention. So I decided I would go to Los Angeles and get in the music business. It's all I knew how to do. I stand before you a failed teacher. I am, and I still see myself today as a failed teacher. So when people ask me how they get in the record business, I always say, fail at something. You want to be an artist? Go fail at something. And I mean it literally. I'll tell you why. Because we're not shaped by our successes. We're shaped by how we respond to what we perceive as our failures. It's in the act of recovery that your voice comes out. In that little moment where you don't know where it's going to go, you don't know the answer. That little gesture, that moment when you have to come up with something, because it's happening in real time. That's happening in real time. Matter of fact, time is what's carrying, it's what's driving. In that recovery, in those little moments of recovery, our voices come out. And I believe that's how life goes forward, by reacting to its failures, perceived failures. So here's the anecdote. I'm in the record business now, and I'm trying to make my life as a record producer. And I got the opportunity to produce one of my heroes. He's a singer named John Hendricks. He was for a long time with a group called Lambert, Hendricks, and Ross, great jazz singers, really prototypical jazz singers. And he had signed to a record company called Arista Records. Arista Records now is a huge company, then it was a small company. And Arista's first hit was a song by Barry Manilow called Mandy. A real corny piece of music, but it worked. So Clive Davis, the man who started Arista Records, knew at the time, this was the mid-70s, that it was important to get some credibility, signed a few jazz guys, signed John Hendricks. John Hendricks is a great, great character. I could tell John Hendricks stories all evening, but suffice it to say that Clive Davis gave John Hendricks the recording budget, told him to go off and make the record, and lo and behold, 3 months later the budget was gone and the record hadn't been started. These things happen in the jazz world. So I was sent, like Frank Buck, into the jungle to bring it back alive, to go get this record, right? They sent me out there. Well, Ben, you know about budgets and you know about jazz, you go out there. Now, John Hendricks is my hero. Clive Davis is the bank. You know, between John and Clive, I'm working for John. So I show up out in San Francisco. I meet John Hendricks. Well, here's how I met John Hendricks. I'm in the recording studio. My first day, I'm going to meet my hero. I've never met him before. I'm so excited. John Hendricks, we're going to make this record. I'm going to be the hero. I'm going to bring it home. It's 1 o'clock. Band's there. John's not there. It's 2 o'clock. John's still not there. Getting a little nervous here because the clock is running. Tick, 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 the mechanical subdivision of events. And in the recording studio, each tick is about $12. So I'm getting worried. About 3 o'clock, John Hendricks runs in. Hey, Ben, how you doing? Nice to meet you, man. Say, can you lend me 25 bucks, man? I got a cab downstairs. I'll be right back. Sure, John, here's 25 bucks. Boom, gone. Didn't see him the rest of the day. Okay, next day. John comes in, and we get started, and we get going. And he's a wonderful man, an educated man. He breaks all the stereotypes about jazz musicians. You know, you think about jazz musicians, what do you hear? Well, I know what you hear. And maybe it was true at one time, but it's certainly not true today. John is one of those people of whom it's true and not true at the same time. So I got to know him, and we did spend some wonderful time together. And one day, not long after that, we were sitting in the recording studio waiting for the rest of the band to come in. And he said to me, hey man, do you know this song called Old Folks? I said, no. You don't know Old Folks? Come on over to the piano, man, I'll teach it to you. So we walked over to the piano, and he sang and kind of called chord changes, showed me as we were doing it. And you know, the wonderful thing about jazz musicians is they can only do it one way. Every time a great musician picks up his horn and puts it in his mouth, he can only play 100% who he or she is. There's no pretending. You have to practice as you live it. There's not a, because if you practice, you know, pretending when you go up in front of people, you'll be pretending. You only have one way to play music. You only have one way to be. You have only one voice. See what I'm saying? There's an integrated approach to life that I think it's useful, right? So he sat down next to me at the piano bench, taught me Old Folks, and sang it, and just gave it up. And at the end, the engineer said over the talk, like, hey, do you guys want to hear that? Well, we didn't know it had been recorded, so yeah, let's hear it. So the engineer played it back for us. And John loved his vocal. He said, well, that's it. I'll never sing it any better than that. That's going on the record. I said, but John, I'm obviously making some mistakes on the piano here. You know, I mean, we'll do it again. It'll be great. He said, no, that's it. I'm never going to sing it any better than that. That's it. I said, look, John, as the producer, right now I'm the producer, as the producer, we'll do it again. And he said, no, man, don't you understand? Sometimes the mistakes are the only part that's jazz. been very, very lucky as a failed teacher to have something that I loved that I could fall back on. For me, that is the ultimate message. For me, this is about falling in love. I fell in love with this music when I was 7 or 8 years old. And if any of you have truly fallen in love, you know that first moment, it's amazing, isn't it? That first moment can sustain you through your whole life. People come and go, times are good or bad, but that first little taste of falling in love stays with you forever. So, that's what the arts can do. You can fall in love.